what I do, what I do, da da do, da da do.
All right, here we are. Hello, Els. First of all, how are you doing?
Everyone, doing good? How are you?
Are you ready to be grilled?
I'm ready. I'm really ready to be grilled.
Ready for the toughest interview of your life?
Yep.
Good.
I'm ready. Hit me.
So I wanted to first start by saying, I wanted to get you on a chat for fairly obvious reasons. You are our head copywriter, and I think it would be super valuable to, share your story with our community of aspiring copywriters, to, talk them through how you started and that, that whole journey, what obstacles you overcame, and then to mainly focus this video on what you and I both think are the most common pitfalls and obstacles and challenges that new copywriters face, kind of both within the art, the science, and the business of copywriting, and then essentially how to overcome or preempt those obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're talking about. Let's start with, your journey into copywriting. Like, how did you? I mean, I know, but if you can share with the community, how did you get into it?
Sure. So I started off. I went into an entry-level marketing position. So it's probably quite different to a lot of you guys. When I was about 24, and didn't really know what area of marketing I wanted to be in. I was just kind of sounding it all out, and then did a bit of copywriting, but kind of went up through the marketing ranks. So I was kind of marketing coordinator, project manager, kind of, so more about the media relations kind of side, and obviously coming across a lot of copy and writing a lot of copy for that, but still hadn't quite tweaked that copy was for me. And then I started working at the Creative Copywriter, went down the project manager route again, and then decided to just go for it with freelance copywriting. So I went off as a freelancer for a bit, learned loads and loads and loads, which is all in the course. And then eventually came back to Creative Copywriter, and now I'm the head writer.
Yeah, and just to share with everyone, you were freelancing for us during that time as well.
Yeah,
right?
well, I was freelance. I was freelance. I had quite a few clients and some other agencies as well, but mostly, a lot of from Creative Copywriters still. I've never quite left. I've always been there.
You never quite left. Yeah. I'd say you were always a storyteller though, right? You were, it's not that writing was something you suddenly decided was something that you enjoyed and were good at later in life.
Yeah, and I think that's a weird thing, and I think it happens to a lot of people with copywriting. I've always written, always been really into creative writing. I've written children's books and working on a novel for a really long period of time, like lots of writers. And I just never thought, it just never quite tweaked, oh, this is what I should be doing. Like, this is, I'm good at this and I enjoy it. I love playing with words, and never quite fusing that the creative writing side, you can do that as a job in copywriting. So and I think that's a lot of people that I've spoke to recently who are starting a copywriting journey have just said, I've always loved writing, but never actually realised I can make a career out of it. So.
I think that's it. And the same what we can see already with our community. There are so many people in different walks of life, different ages, have coming from different original career paths, that suddenly there's that light bulb moment that, oh, actually there is a lucrative career to be made from, a passion and skill for writing.
We just taught like the phrase penniless writer is just like probably ringing around everyone's heads. It's like really well known. You don't make money from writing. It's like, but you can. So, and good
Definitely.
money.
I'll add to that story, if I may, that when we first started working together, when we first hired you to work on, it was at that time, as you know, we were small and we were wearing many hats. And you were kind of doing project management and sales and copy editing but I remember it was the creative writing that I'd read of yours beforehand that gave me that kind of push to be like, oh, you'd be a perfect fit for the creative copywriter. So it was Bertie B, it was your children's story that was that thing that really made me think, right, you'd be perfect.
Yeah. And that's great. And I think it is just really that people making that connection between it is so important.
Definitely. And so what would you say is the first, when thinking back to when you started as a copywriter, because you were kind of editing copy beforehand, but when you started as a freelancer, what would you say you struggled with most yourself?
In terms of the actual writing?
Yeah, and let's start with the writing itself first.
I think a really big transition for copywriters is is actually making that connection between the target audience. It's who you're writing for. And copywriting isn't about being introspective. It's not, sharing your thoughts. There's a lot of creative writers will have been doing. You're sharing the brands. You're sharing the brand with the world and creating that connection between the audience, and that's not an easy thing to get to make that transition, I think. And so much of it is down to how good a brief you get, and in making sure that, I'm moving more into freelance copywriting now, but making like that brief that you're getting is so important, because you need to really understand that target audience before you can talk to them.
Definitely. I think it's that bridging that gap, isn't it, between you are suddenly no longer, right, as you said, writing your own thoughts or ideas down. You are now communicating as if you're that brand, but at the same time you're trying to be inside the mind of the target prospect. You're trying to say things that they're kind of already thinking at the same time, and gradually nurture and push those thoughts in certain directions. So they're kind of nodding and going and really agreeing and connecting with that brand.
Yeah. And I actually think that that's a big mistake that brands, I think we're going to cover that in a bit, but it's a big mistake that brands are making as well, is not really understanding their target audience and how to talk to them, which is why we do what we do and where we come in.
That's why we exist. That's why we're here. That's why we've got roofs over our heads. So what about newbie copywriters? So copywriting starting out, copywriters who are starting out, for example, those or some of whom are in our community. What do you think are the biggest mistakes when it comes to, how they tackle copy? Again, this is now we're talking about the art of copywriting, not the business side.
Yeah, I think that there's something that I think we call it the riddle scenario, which is just such a temptation for copywriters. And I used to do it as well when I first started, where you just try and be, you're trying to be as creative as possible and, tell this story or really draw people in. But sometimes people can use too many analogies, too many metaphors, too many similes, too much description, that it ends up a bit of a riddle, and you lose people. So it's using analogies, metaphors and similes, using descriptive language, but still maintaining clarity. They still need to know what you're talking about and follow the story. And I think that that's really hard to get, first of all. It's something that you learn over time, that balance between clarity and creativity, I guess. And it's something we still struggle when we were writing our own homepage. We didn't. No, it's still something that you always have to remember, especially if your mind is always leaning towards the creative side, like mine is something to really remember.
Totally. I think that's where, and we talk about this in the course, the editing process is almost more important than the first round. So we use that quote, write drunk, edit sober, get your thoughts out onto the page, be creative, but it's about editing, coming back with it with fresh eyes, looking at it on another day, sending it out to people as well. That's so valuable, getting feedback, because you might come up with an analogy, a metaphor, a simile that you think kind of works. You've attached these two things, but someone who reads it immediately, if they don't get it instantly, it's not worth it. It won't work. It'll just confuse people.
Loads of times if we've got clients in the States or clients elsewhere, and metaphors that we might use. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it's metaphors we use in the UK don't necessarily translate, and they sound really strange in other countries. So it's being aware of that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
More of a riddle than it would have been.
I think that they're kind of, I'd say that creative writers that come into copywriting, for one, might try to overdo it, you know, might try to kind of go a bit too heavy on the metaphor, similes, colourful language, and which can, you know what, I think maybe can work a bit better for a blog post. I'd say there's slightly more room in long form to do that in an article. Slightly more room. It still needs to be, I'd still say that clarity is number one. You know, you're balancing many different things here, aren't you? You want it to be engaging, you want it to be unique, you want it to grip and persuade. So that's where colourful language and metaphors and stories really work. But you don't want to do that at kind of insert all of those at the cost of clarity and at the cost of like really leading people and helping people clearly and instantly understand what you're talking about and what the benefits are and what you're aiming to achieve.
Yeah, exactly. You need to, if you're using storytelling, you want to build the scene, you want to or set the scene, you want to create anticipation and all of those things. But yeah, you can't don't get lost in your own creativity, basically. Don't kind of overindulge that area, because this isn't your chance to be you're not showcasing creativity, you're trying to talk to the audience, and you can use creative means to get there, but it's not a writer showcase, basically. I've fallen into the trap so many times and I know how it goes.
I think some people just try and force it, and it's about getting the balance right. If you can make it work, great. If not, you don't have to kind of force it in there.
Yeah.
Do you have any other mistakes like newbie copywriters?
Yeah, I think there's one of the main ones is always not making, and we call it the big chop. If you haven't come across it yet, you will. And this isn't prose, and the chop is all about keeping the reader there. So just really short, choppy sentences, one thought per sentence, and it all is about creating this hypnotic flow for the reader so they can easily digest what you're writing. And especially if we're talking about blog posts, it's making them easily skimmable so people can find what they're looking for really quickly. You might have an intro that's too basic for somebody and they need to get onto the more advanced stuff down the bottom, for instance. So it needs to just be really easily skimmable and digestible.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll add one just kind of on the note of trying to force too much creativity into copy, or again on the same note, trying to push the conversation side of things too much. You know, we say conversational copy, right? That doesn't mean it has to be really over the top. Don't make it as quirky as possible. Especially, you know, you can be having a conversation in real life with a C-level person of a prestigious brand. You're not going to be in person being super quirky, you know, and throwing out all these jokes and questions, right? So you can be conversational but serious at the same time. You know, you can
totally. It's so true, and I think it's the question thing as well, like getting that balance right with questions. You're not going to sit in a conversation with someone and just bombard them with question after question. So yeah, just getting that balance right is really important.
Exactly. And I've seen that a bit in some of our summer learners, like, you know, 5 questions in a row, which again, just think, would you say that in real life, in a real life conversation? You might have 2 and then, you know, a sentence and maybe another one. And yeah, I think looking at some of Ogilvy's old ads are really great examples of just really natural language, nice, choppy, conversational, and that's where you want to get to, really.
Yeah, definitely. And it's I think just look at as much copy as you can. Good copy though, blog posts with good examples of copy, and obviously ones from the course, because the more you read and the more it slowly just gets into your subconscious what good copy is and what it isn't.
Yeah, and we'll move on, but I just wanted to add one point, which was the other thing I think is forcing too much sales psychology in. So, you know, learning conversion copywriting techniques can be like a blessing and a curse, because I've seen a lot of copywriters go for this really maybe old school sales psychology where it's just pure conversion copy techniques, you know, way too many of them, and it comes across as salesy. And you know,
and also
it's
that kind
getting
of
the balance right, I think.
Yeah, it's the conversion copy. You see people try and almost like make the reader feel quite bad about themselves, almost, so they buy what you're selling. So yeah, I think that's another, when you can overdo sales psychology, it can have like a really bad effect on the reader where they just think, no.
Definitely. I think it's all about balance. So next question, again, for newbie copywriters starting out, what do you think are some of the biggest pitfalls when it comes to the other side of copywriting, which is not the art and science, but the delivery of the work, you know, the business side of it, if you're a freelancer?
I mean, we're all different and we all have different strengths. But one thing that goes across everybody is and everyone makes the same mistakes with getting the right brief. You have the brief is going to make or break your project. You can't just get inside your client's head and just, you don't know what they want unless it's all written down. You've got a really thorough briefing process, because all that's going to happen if you don't carry out the briefing process properly is they're going to come back and say that's not what we wanted, unless you're really lucky and nail it, or they're a really easygoing client who trust you completely, then great. But more often than not, and we learned this over years, like our briefing process has evolved through years and years of fine-tuning and mistakes and learning, that all that happens is the client won't be happy and you'll have to go back and do rounds and rounds of feedback.
Is there a way to, obviously, like, I think from what you're saying, getting the briefing questions is super important.
Briefing questions.
Are there any other steps that copywriters can take to avoid, like, you coming back with a 20-page website and going, here we go, thinking it's really good, and the client saying, no, that's all wrong? So
I think it's really important to talk to your clients. Some people are better at writing what they want. Some people are better at telling what they want verbally. So have a call. Always ask if they're permission to record it, first of all. So then you always have a recording of that call. I would never go into a 20-page website without doing a tone of voice checkpoint, where the homepage is ideal. Just for a website, for example, you use that as an example. It's the hardest page to write generally, and it's going to cause the most rounds of feedback. So if you can hone that with the tone of voice checkpoint, then it's everything. The rest of the web pages will just filter down, and it will be a lot easier. So yeah, I think that's a really important point. If you've got a big project, do one small bit, stagger it, so you're not going to end up having to rewrite 20 pages of copy.
Awesome. So send over like one page of copy first to make sure that the voice is right, have that back and forth.
Yeah.
You know, make sure you're in agreement that this is the direction they're heading in, and then continue with the rest of the project.
And just to add, I think it's quite rare that you're going to send over a homepage copy and they're going to love it first time. And any copy really is, so don't be disheartened if you're getting feedback is a good thing. It's a good thing. You can use it, you know.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, one of the things that we do, again, talking about client expectations, making clients happy, making sure you nail the job overall. You know, one of the things we do, as you know from the beginning, is we try to manage those expectations by saying to the client, listen, this is a two-way street, right? And we actually have feedback guidelines that we give to clients. We have a one-page PDF which explains to clients how we expect feedback, and kind of from the offset makes them understand that, look, we might absolutely nail this with the first draft. We might do, but that's quite rare. You know, look, we can't, you know, we'll get it into good shape, but we're not inside their minds. We don't know exactly, we don't know their industry and audience as well as they do. So there will naturally be that feedback process where they'll come back. It might happen with a couple of revisions to get it right. And I think one thing you can do as a freelancer or an agency from the offset is to explain that to the client, because some clients, especially when you're working with smaller businesses like startup owners, for example, we know the types. Sometimes they've never worked with a copywriter before, so they're expecting everything. And if they're the owner of that business, they are super precious over it. There's a common type of person, an entrepreneur, that's like really, really precious over the work, you know. And if something comes back and it's not exactly in their voice, it's not exactly what they dreamed of, they might freak out and they might say, no, I'm not continuing with you. So you need to try and preempt that from the beginning. Managing
expectations and not being scared to hold your hands up and say, yeah, I don't, you know your industry better than me. It's not your job to know the ins and outs of their industry. It's for them to tell you about it and you to translate that into great copy. So you don't, it's okay to say you don't know and ask for information.
Awesome, perfect. So I'm jumping to a later question, right? I'm going to mix things up.
Throwing a curveball.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Because you mentioned the homepage in there and website copy. So I wanted to in this conversation to dive into some specifics of certain jobs and, like, again, obstacles and how you overcome them. So what do you think when it comes to writing homepage copy, for example? As we know, it's probably the hardest part of website copy. What's the biggest challenge / obstacle, and how do you overcome it?
I think that there's two main things. There's three things really. You've got your headline needs to be, when you're going onto a homepage, you need to know exactly what they do. So I don't think that there's much room for abstract copy on a homepage, unless it's a particular I think it more belongs to campaigns, where you can afford to be a bit more abstract. So you need instant clarity. As soon as they need to know, it's better to have a clear headline than a super creative one. If you can do both, then great. They also need to know your unique value proposition, which we cover all of this in the course, but the UVP is something, it's exactly what the brands can offer that's completely unique. It's something value they offer that's unique. So ideally that would be in the headline or subheader. It's like straight away when you first when the reader first comes onto the site. Lastly, which is a huge one, is how brands will always get features and benefits modeled up. So the features of the product is what it does, or like special features that it has, and then the benefit is how it benefits the customer. And this, what they always say, people buy benefits, they don't buy features. Is how it's going to benefit. So you see companies a lot of the time just listing features on a homepage, and they're not going to sell it necessarily. So really getting to grips with those marketing fundamentals of features and benefits will serve you really well, because you're going to have to advise the client and translate them.
Yeah, definitely. I think I agree with all of those points. It's that it's not easy to get the headline of a homepage right, because it's not like a blog post title where the job is just to get them to read the next line, you know. So a bit of intrigue can be enough with a blog post to get someone to read on. When it comes to a website, they're probably reviewing other competitors, and you need to kind of instantly show them the benefit of and the unique benefit of working or buying something from that brand or that service or that product. So, but I agree, it's all about instant clarity. I think the best example that we talk about a lot in the copywriting world is Domino's pizza, hot fresh pizza delivered to your door in 30 minutes, or it's free.
I thought you were going to say our header, our homepage header.
Yeah, I should have, right?
And Domino's.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, we're at the top. Domino's next. Everyone's talking about our header. Okay, cool, awesome, really good tips. So, what about? Let's delve into storytelling. I know you're a great storyteller, and you use it amazingly in long form content, blog posts. Obviously, then there's storytelling used for brands as well, brand storytelling, and it's one of those buzzwords, right, which is kind of thrown about a lot. When it comes to storytelling in copywriting, what do you think is a common mistake, obstacle, challenge, and how do you overcome it?
I mean, we talked about the riddle and metaphors and analogy thing earlier. I think another thing, and it's such a basic thing, but it's so easy to not do. So a story is different from a theme. It's not your theme of your campaign. It's not your, something has to happen. It has a plot, basically.
Yeah.
And that's for your brand story, or if you're using storytelling in a stylistic way in a blog post or, email or whatever, something has to happen in the plot. So you have like different story archetypes that you can use, and that you'll recognize loads of them, but every story has to have something happen. So it could be a character, and it has to have characters. So it's like character, and it rises and something really good's happening, and then it falls, then it might rise again. But the point is, remember that your story has to have a plot.
Yeah.
And you can map that out, and it could just be just in your intro for your blog post, something you use an analogy to tell a really good story that relates to what you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
But it have a plot.
And so do you find that some writers try to storytell, but it's just descriptive language and there's not actually anything happening? There's not like an arc or anything like that?
Yeah, something has to happen. It's that building anticipation, and that's what makes storytelling so powerful, is because you're wondering, well, what's going to happen next? But it has to be worth it. They're investing time into listening to your story or reading your story, and then like nothing happens, or or it's a bit boring. Like it has to something actually of value. It's got to be worth the wait, basically. It's got to be worth them reading it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think that kind of lends itself to the idea of clickbait, and why clickbait has a negative connotations, right? Because the essence of clickbait is really not too dissimilar to the essence of conversion copy and writing headlines that get clicks, right? In the end of the day, as copywriters, especially when we're writing headline articles, article headlines or headers for social media, anything the way we want someone to click through, that's exactly what we want. We want clickbait. We want something that people will want to click through. But I suppose, and you wrote an article on this, when it comes to clickbait, that's used widely on kind of BuzzFeed style websites, often you're promised this big, or they build anticipation, right? Like, this celebrity just picked up a bottle and you'll never guess what happened next.
Guess what happened? It's always that, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And they go on.
It's never worth it, like, ever. I mean, it's just 5 things you'd never guess about something. You would know. They're just trying to get you to click through, and that's when we talk about using the curiosity gap in the superstyling module or course, and it's that balance between making sure that it's worth it when they click through. You're not just you don't want someone to just click through to a page and then not get any value and be disappointed. I think people reading a post and being disappointed in it is probably the worst thing that could happen. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah,
I think that's our job, and this is where probably content strategy comes in beyond kind of copywriting, which is obviously what we do. It's to marry up the sales psychology that we know as copywriters and that we know how to use well, with actual value, and even like more value than they're expecting. That's the best thing you can do, is like build anticipation and then give them even more. And that's where, I suppose, maybe moving on to the content marketing side of things, that's where you want long form content that is packed full of value, that's not fluffy, that might use a few nice storytelling techniques, anticipation builders, and then you give them, tons and tons of valuable content, links out to other resources, insights from experts and influencers, the kind of thing that they will naturally want to share and naturally want to create a PDF of and download and come back to.
Exactly. And just basically just thinking, wow, that was really helpful, that was really valuable and interesting.
So that's a nice segue to my next question, which is long form content, blog posts, ebooks, white papers. What would you say are, again, same question, different format, common pitfalls?
I think using storytelling in the right way. We've covered quite a lot of it. I think making sure that they're digestible and skimmable, and you're not just writing this big block copy. The point of a blog post is to provide as much value as possible. As we've said, you're going to come up against companies who say, "Oh, we need you to write a blog post on our vice president of sales getting a promotion or something," and it's just you have to. The best practice would be to advise the client that is not creating value for their readers. It's not interesting. It's internal news, and a lot of people use their blog for company news, and you just really need to just try and navigate that and just advise them in the best way. So creating value, as much value as possible, not promoting the brand. Using storytelling in an enticing, gripping way. You don't always have to, but it's a really good way with blog posts, just to, if you can tell a relatable story that really the customer can really identify with, they're going to stick with you.
Totally. And I will add one, because you mentioned it before, which is making it skimmable. And I think that while, you will have different readers, your target audience will come in different shapes and sizes, and some of them will have the time and be ready and willing and will enjoy reading longer stories. Others, even like myself, to be honest, even though I'm a massive content fan, I just hardly have any time, and I like to skim stuff for the main point. So I guess what we try to do with our blog posts is have that balance, a combination of like the best of both worlds. So start with a nice bit of storytelling, but then make it skimmable. Have subheaders, have bullet points, have like key takeaways at the end, so that those that don't have the time or aren't really into long form content can skim and still get the value. Yeah,
definitely. And understanding that it's, I think we said before, there would be at different stages. If you've got a really long form blog post, loads of people might know that beginning, you can't cover everybody in one blog post and everyone's kind of knowledge level. So just making it so they can skim to the bit they need.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Okay, we skipped a question. I'm going to jump back to it. When it comes to this thing we called blank page anxiety or writer's block, productivity, all of that kind of stuff, which I definitely struggle with and always did.
Everyone does. Everyone. If you, sorry, finish your question.
Well, what I think, the question is, how do you overcome it? Like, what do you do? What are your secrets?
Oh, I suffer with this massively. If you've got, it's writing, you're constantly having to. It's not actually that natural to constantly pour out creativity in writing. So, but that's where formulas will really help you as well, that kind of sciencey part. But I think the most important thing is, it's way easier to edit something that's not very good than it is to just sit there and stare at that page waiting for copy perfection to come out, because that's just stressful and you're putting this really big pressure on yourself. And it's far easier to edit other people's work as a copywriter and to edit your own work. So just, I'm not saying just write blindly. You've got your brief, you've got maybe a spit draft, you've got your prep all in place. So the sciencey bit. And then with that in mind, just write something. If you think this is rubbish, it doesn't matter, because you've got it down on paper and it's a starting point. That always helps. Also, it sounds really simple, but I can be staring at a page for ages and not know where to take it or where to go, and just think, wow, I'm not going to be able to do this in the time needed. If I go for a 10-minute walk, just put some music on and just don't think about it, I come back and it's suddenly there and I can just do it. And that happens like 80% of the time when I've got blank page anxiety.
That's it. That's the secret. Go for a walk. Put some
Walk.
headphones on.
Up there.
Yeah, if you're allowed, right? Depending on the lockdown situation. So yeah, I mean, I think different writers have different tricks. We've mentioned in the course one technique I've never actually done, but it's something we talk about, is covering your screen and just writing. Another one is, which we do talk about as well, is just pretending you're writing to a friend. And again, just forget all of the sales psychology and everything. If you need to persuade someone to do something, if you were writing to a mate, how would you do it? You know, and start with that, and then start chiseling it and fine tuning it and injecting the things that we know, the science and the formulas that we know work and help, because that will already at least start you off with a natural tone and something that's not too aggressive or not overly creative with like a really elaborate story. So, and the other thing that you can do, which I do, which helps me, is to to actually just use that feature in Google Docs where you say it out loud and record it, get it transcribed. Sometimes I even do it with Nitsan. If we're together in the room, I'll walk up and down with my hands behind my back and say it. And for some reason, when I'm not looking at those words on the screen, I'm a lot better, and I'm not self-editing. And I think that that self-editing part of your brain as a kind of perfectionist can be your worst enemy. You save that for when you actually edit, because that's when you can keep coming back and really polish it and make it great.
Yeah, that's true.
Cool. So I've got a question. Yeah, I think the last question is, where do you think most companies fall short with their copy? Like, in terms of us as copywriters, as newbies, maybe taking the course, we might not know, you know, without being out there in the real world, we might not know what is the biggest problem that we solve. If companies are coming already with copy or content, or even if we're proactively approaching them and you know, essentially saying, I think I can make your copy better, where do you think most companies fall short?
Yeah, I think that there's a huge tendency to put a massive focus on design. So design's like, you know, it's a really emotive thing, everybody, you know, and it's important, you do need it. So, but also the power of words often gets neglected. And that's why so many brands have rubbish copy, because it's an afterthought. They don't realize how much it matters. If they've got great design, then why do you know, it doesn't matter. People are gonna, you know, and it does, as we know, it really matters. So it's that kind of, they don't invest enough in the copy, they try and do it themselves, and they have so they're missing out on this huge opportunity to have dynamic copy that's really relatable. That's our job, is to connect the brands to their audience. We're that stopgap in the middle that connects it, like, you know, the magnet, if you will. And I think that's where most brands are falling short.
And what do you think, like, based on them writing it themselves, where do you think, like, what kind of how does it usually come out? Like, what are the problems that you see in that copy? If we went and looked at 10 websites now randomly that haven't been written by copywriters or written by not the best copywriters, what are those biggest kind of faux pas?
Well, if you're not a copywriter, you're going to look at other people's copy in your niche, in your industry. So you're like, oh, what is everyone else doing? And then you're going to come out with copy that is like everybody else's. So you're not going to have that UVP clearly. You're not going to have, you know, all the unique copy that you really, really need to stand out. You don't want to be like everybody else. You need to stand out. So that's the copywriter's main job, is to help you identify that and translate it.
Definitely. I think probably a very common one, oldest mistake in the book is also third person copy, not really talking to the reader, to the person, not using the word you, for example, we talk about in the course. And
jargon city as well, like the kind of when you get people, especially techie, or just any industry that has its own jargon, and then they use it day to day, and it's really and then it works its way into the copy and just becomes really jargon filled. So that's something to steer clear of.
Yeah, I agree. In the tech world, we talk about robots writing for robots, or lawyers writing for lawyers, when their target audience, in the end of the day, even if they're a very technical brand, even if their target audience, their target prospects are extremely technical people, like CTOs, for example, they're still humans, right? They still watch Netflix. They still like stories. I'm sure they still had stories read to them as children growing up. So all of that psychology that we use in copywriting still applies. Just because you're in the B2B technical world, it doesn't mean that it needs to go out the window. The tone would probably be different. The tone, if you're selling socks to the public, for example, might be different to selling like a £1 million piece of software to the CEO or CTO of a company. However, they're still human, so they still respond to those same emotional triggers. Conversational copy still works. Again, it shouldn't necessarily be the most quirky conversational copy, but it can still be conversational and have a more of a serious tone.
Yeah, and it's so true. And on that note, with tech, since we're talking about tech, they're the prime example of not translating features into benefits. Yeah. So just chuck a load of features in there that don't, users of tech, they still need to know how it actually benefits them. So. Yeah,
totally. And I'll add one extra thought on that. I think that even when companies in the B2B world do focus on benefits rather than just features, they often focus on very generic benefits that you'll see everywhere, especially in the SaaS world. Our tool will help you save time on this so that you can focus on what really matters, growing your business. Right? Yeah. Think how many times you've seen that line everywhere. Yeah. Every tool does that. Every tool, exactly. Every tech or SaaS tool, it helps with efficiency and productivity. That's what technology is for, right? So the way to strengthen that benefit is, I think, to focus on specificity there. How many hours does it save? Work it out. Talk to your customers, clients. Work out how many hours. Be really specific. If you said our tool saves you 38.73 hours a month in order to scale your business by X amount or something like that, suddenly that gets much more intriguing. Suddenly it builds more trust than a general kind of wash of generic wording.
Specificity is so important. It's hard to say.
It's very hard to say. I was quite surprised with myself. Specificity. I'm gonna say it a lot more often now. Keep dropping it into every sentence. All right, awesome, nice one, Els. Thank you so much for sharing all your worldly wisdom. I think there's a lot there for our community to learn from, mistakes to try to avoid. I wish that we'd had these kind of tips when we started.
Me too.
Thanks again. We will both be in the community, so I hope everyone enjoyed this.
I hope you've all found it helpful. Food for thought.
Lots of food for thought. All right, thanks a lot.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.